Welcome to another edition of the Sim Racing Garage. I'm Barry Rowland, and in this episode, we're going to be reviewing the T150 wheel kit from Thrustmaster, which is compatible with the PlayStation 3 and PlayStation 4, along with the PC. How good can a $200 force feedback wheel kit be? I'll let you decide as we put this unit through the SRG review process. So, let's get to it. Now for a closer look at the Thrustmaster T1 wheel kit. First off, the first thing you notice when you look at this wheel obviously is these blue grips on the steering wheel, and they're very rubbery and they have some little dimples in there, and actually not a bad grip. I've been using it a little bit, and if you don't wear gloves, it's very sticky to your hand. So yeah, in this kind of wheel, I don't see you really needing gloves that much when you're using this kind of a wheel, because it just doesn't have the power. But other than that, the grip actually works pretty good. I was a little surprised by that. We have an 11-inch wheel here, or 280 millimeters if you want to look at it that way. Really, there's not a whole lot to see here as far as the usual stuff here. Do we have a little extra branding down here for Thrustmaster on this little silver line here? The shifters on the wheel are, I'm guessing these are steel. They don't feel like aluminum. And they have this little brushed look on them. I don't know how this is going to show up. Actually, I might get a better look at that once we get to the look inside, and we'll be taking this apart. But yeah, standard fare. Again, as we know, this is a PlayStation 4 and PlayStation 3 compatible, and it has to be on PlayStation 3 to use it with your PC. And I used it with my PlayStation and my PC in my testing. And of course, that means we're going to have the usual PlayStation buttons up here. And they all work great. At least so far they have. We got a little T150 branding down there behind the wheel. And of course on the other side we've got our L3 R2. Let's see if I can get a better look at that. The shadows, there they are. Okay, yeah, that's a good look at it. So anyway, there's our L3, R3 buttons and our little switch to go from PlayStation 3 and 4 and PC. So yeah, not a lot to see there. The casing is typical Thrustmaster looking case, and of course on the bottom it's going to be the typical Thrustmaster clamping that we use, and that comes with the kit obviously. And that's the typical little fork that we get that has the plastic reinforced ribs in there, and of course this little socket in there that this little ball on the end of this bolt will fit into and allow it to swivel around as we're trying to get it situated and tightened down. And unfortunately, this is the only way that you can mount this wheel. I was a little surprised at that when I got it. On the bottom here, it has, of course, the hole for that mount, but it doesn't have any facility for a couple other screws to go in, so you can just hard mount it. Now, you could hard mount it with this single bolt, which might even be better than using that bracket, but it depends on what you're trying to mount it to. But it does have some rubber feet. They're not real sticky, but they are rubber pad. As far as they do have some padding to them. And when I had this on my rig mounted to my metal deck, it had some up and down flex in it, but I was not surprised by that. At the price point these things come in at. Typical injection molded case, not really a lot to see here. And of course we've got our wires coming out the back. We got our power wire. Of course this has an internal power supply, so we're not going to be looking at a external power brick. We've got AC coming directly into it, and we'll actually take a look at that power supply once we have a look inside segment. And of course the mandatory USB connector that we connect to the PlayStation or the PC. Right, not much else to see here. We do have some vents. Actually, there are some vents in there. When I was running this, I did not hear a fan, so I don't know if there's a fan in there. And one curious thing about this, and we'll see that when we open it up, Thrustmaster is actually using kind of they call it a hybrid system, which I guess that's fair, because it's using a pulley, belt pulley system, and it's also using a gear-to-gear system. So it's kind of trying to be like a G29 or the Logitech G27-29 series wheels, but maybe just a little bit less harsh with the gear lash, which means a little bit less detail. And of course that's all subjective and personal preference if you want the smoothness of the belt or you want the precision. I would call maybe not precision, but it's a more tactile feedback that you get from a gear-to-gear type of wheel. Anyway, so we'll see that when we get into the wheel itself. Now, the pedals comes with a pedal set. This is definitely entry-level pedal set here. It's very lightweight. I'm surprised that this weighs, 2 pounds, if that, maybe 1.5 pounds. But it's just potentiometer pedals, and again, once we have a look inside here, we'll be able to see that a little better. And it looks like it has a cover here with these screws, but I don't even know if those are real screws or not. I think all the screws are on the back here. I think they're like fake. But there's really no system here to grab the carpet. If you look on the bottom, it's just rubber feet. So yeah, this could be problematic on the floor of like a hardwood floor and even carpet. I would think you would need to put something back behind it so that you could jam them up there so that you could actually use the pedals, even though it doesn't take much force to use these pedals. And on the bottom we can see a cable management, so you can run this cable either way. You can go to this side or that side depending on which way you need to send it to get to the wheelbase, which of course it plugs into the wheelbase back over here, and you see the plug there. And it also has a plug for the shifter, so you can run the shifter on this. Right, so yeah, nothing remarkable here again with the pedals either. All plastic bits everywhere. There is a couple of screws here so you can actually pull these pedal faces off. I don't think they're adjustable. It doesn't look like it to me. And they got the pedal levers, they're usually the same injection molded plastic with the reinforcement ribs in there. I didn't have a problem using these pedals. They worked fine. But yeah, as far as accuracy, the throttle was good. But boy, this brake pedal was like, yeah, it's just a potentiometer. There's really no feel. There is a little rubbery feel at the end of this pedal stroke, but it just, when you're using it, it's all about location, or the position of your foot you have to memorize to get that braking point. Really, there's no feel at all, and I was a little disappointed that they didn't do a little better job with the brake pedal. But again, we got to consider where this is aimed at, and it's really entry-level type of wheel system. And yeah, I had trouble actually getting my braking points good. After a while, you kind of get muscle memory going, and yeah, you can adapt to it, but yeah, it's pretty, it's not very good. I'm just going to say it's just not very good compared to obviously a load cell, but some of the other potentiometer ones, like the upgraded the T3PA is actually better than this, and this is just, yeah, it's pretty bad, but it's usable. I mean, you can use it. I was able to figure it out with my foot and finally get to where I could pretty much brake consistently, but I was still, sometimes because of the feeling you were getting the wheel when you're coming over some bumps into a corner, you kind of would think, oh, well, I don't know, is it, am I braking hard enough? And yeah, I was locking up a lot, in other words. So, but good thing here is we actually have two 6mm screw holes here, one here and one here, that allowed me to mount this directly to my P1 rig. So that's a big plus. But again, when you think about it, I'm not sure why we put screws in here but don't put them over here in the wheelbase. Whatever. It just kind of puzzles me a little bit that you went to the trouble to put some metal inserts in here somewhere so you can run some screws to secure this to your rig, but nothing over here except the, this guy. Anyway, not much else to see here, as you can tell. The fun stuff's going to be on the look inside segment, where we can actually take a look in here and see how all this is working. And of course, the pedals will be pretty simple, just some potentiometers and springs, the usual fare that we see in this kind of a pedal set. And yeah, so not much else to discuss on the closer look. You guys have probably seen this a million times already anyway on YouTube. And what we'll do next is we'll get to the look inside and start taking things apart so we can see just what's going on inside this Thrustmaster T150 wheel. Okay, now for the look inside segment. First off, the steering wheel does come off of this base, but it's attached to a wire, and I've already taken out a couple of screws. You see there's one that goes right on the top there, and there's also one on the bottom here. How well you're going to be able to see that, but you can see the slot there that leads to the screw. And I've actually took those out already to see what I needed to do with the wheel, and they're kind of a thick, if you will, sheet metal type screw, and it's got some Loctite on it. You can see the red Loctite. And if you take the wheel off, there's actually a cord. You have to be careful when you take it off, because you can see there's a cord here. See that? Yeah. And it's kind of springy, so I imagine it's got some kind of a spring or coil in it or something like that. But yeah, this is no reason really to take it off to be able to get to what we need to. And it's actually looks like a DIN plug inside of there. Oh, well, that's gonna, you can see that, but I've tried to pull it off and it won't come off, so I don't really try to rip things apart. So I probably would, if I really wanted to take that wire off, I would go ahead and disassemble the complete wheel, which is screws all over the place. And I think we'll just leave that alone, because really what we're interested in is the wheelbase and the power, not so much just the steering wheel. So with that said, we've got some screws to take off here as usual. We've got 2 up top here. See those down there? So I got 2 there, and then I have 2 on the bottom on each side. So that's 4 screws. And there's going to be 3 screws. The reason I'm taking this beauty ring off is there's actually 3 screws up here that I'm going to have to get to. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go ahead and pull these 4 screws out, and then this will come loose, and then I'll be able to get to the 3 top ones. And while I'm doing all this unscrewing, of course, as usual, I'll be speeding things up a bit and using this little drill to help me out. All right, so now that we've got this little ring, you see it's flopping around now that we had the screws out of it. See that flopping around? What we're really interested in is these screws at the top. So you got one there. We've got one over here on the side. Let's move this ring so you can see it. It's got one down there on the side. Well, let's see. How am I going to look at this? And we have one. Let me turn the steering wheel. We can see it better over here. Kind of fiddly actually, but there's that one over there, and of course we have another one over on this side, this being hidden also. So all I'm going to do is pull those 3 out, then we'll have the front part of the top cover loose, and then we can go to the bottom and start going after those screws. Alright, so now we've got those 3 screws loose on the top here, so now what we got to do is go to the bottom. And we have a lot of rattling going on while we're doing this. And we have 7 screws on the bottom too. We've got 3 across the bottom here. We've got 2 on each side there. And they're the same kind of screws. All these screws are the same. They're these typical plastic threads that you find in this kind of application. Let's see if I can get a good focus there. And they're all the same, which is good because you don't have to worry about one being longer than the other as you're trying to reassemble it. Of course, reassembling is always worse than disassemble. So we'll go ahead and get all of these 7 out and see where we are from there. All right, so now the top should come off rather easily if we've done everything right. Get that ring off of there, and there you have it. And of course, just the regular kind of top here, the injection molded stuff. There are 2 screws in here, and these screws are actually holding the Thrustmaster nameplate on the top here. So that's actually a nameplate that they screw on here. And I guess maybe it's metal. It's got to be steel, I guess, I would imagine. I don't know, maybe not, but I'm kind of surprised they did that and didn't just put an injection molded imprint of Thrustmaster on there, but whatever. Yeah. So, and of course we got the vents you can see in there and on the inside for cooling. Get that out of the way, and now we have it. We have access to the fun stuff. All right. First off, as I said before in the closer look, this is what they call a hybrid drive system. And of course we have the electric motor over here that's driving things. And it has a pinion gear and it has a belt on it. Get you a little closer look here. Alright, so there's our pinion gear with the belt on it. And as we turn this, that belt obviously is going to turn this gear in here. See that gear there? It has the belt on it. And you can see that one turning. And that gear has another pinion gear on it. You can see it on the bottom down here. Down low, if I can get to it. So it's down there low on the bottom. And it's actually turning the gear that's attached to the steering wheel column itself. So you see how all that works? So what we have here is a belt to gear and then gear to gear type of system, which is, and that's why I felt when I first drove this, it had some of the cues or the tactile feedback cues that a Logitech G27, G29, or a 920 that they have. And of course we know those are just gear driven. There's no belts on them. So they're kind of going with a hybrid thing here. They're using the belt, I think, to amplify the power properly. And then they're using the gear, because it's a low powered system to begin with, to bring some of that tactile feedback back to it. Now, like a T300's got nothing but belts on the gears. So that has the power, though. It has a bigger motor and it has more power, so it can still bring the finer tactile feedback or the force feedback cues to your hands, whereas this one doesn't have as big a motor. So that's the solution they came up with. And surprisingly enough, it doesn't work that bad. You do get some pretty good force feedback cues in this. When I was riding in iRacing and even in Project Cars and PlayStation 4, once I set the feedback to, I believe it was intermediate feel, because of the different type of feels you have: raw, intermediate, and some other things. But yeah, it didn't feel that bad, actually. And these pulleys, of course, this is a $200 wheel. We have to keep remembering that when we're looking at how this is built. These pulleys here, obviously, they're just on some metal shafts. They're not on bearings or anything like that. The belt is it looks like it says something Fong, Yaifeng. I don't know if you guys will be able to read that. Yaifeng. So, looks like about 8mm wide belt, and it's a pretty quiet system. It doesn't have the same kind of lash that the Logitechs do as far as the noise and the feel to them, but it does have some of the characteristics, which surprised me that they went with this system. But again, like I said, I think that's why they went with it, because it's such a smaller motor. Now, speaking of this motor, this is obviously not a very big one, and you can see inside of there, if the light catches it right, you can see the motor actually turn. See the coils? All right, so they're actually turning inside of there, and we have a fan down here that's actually blowing on the holes in this housing to keep things cool. And a neat thing that I did notice on this is you can see there's a little thermal attachment here on top of this motor housing. So when it gets warm enough, it activates the fan. That's why I didn't hear the fan. Of course, it's a small fan anyway, but if you have this fan running fast, you're going to hear it. It's going to be whining pretty good. And I did, once I used it a while, I could hear the fan. But yeah, it's kind of cool the way they've actually put this thermal wire up here, and then that's what's going to activate the fan automatically when it gets too hot. Right. Also, while we're looking here on this metal piece here, of course, this is just one piece of sheet metal here. Well, maybe not sheet metal. It's maybe 3/16 thick. Maybe not that thick. Maybe an eighth. But it's only one piece in there. You can see the flange down the bottom there where it stops. See that? So the flange stops right about here. But you can also see there's a circuit board hanging out down here. See that thing? And that's the optical sensor. That is a position sensor. So it's actually pulling the position sensing off of this pulley right here. So you can see it's right behind the pulley that has the belt on it. So that's where we're getting our position sensing. And it seems to me, and when I'm looking at this, of course I do this a lot when I'm looking at designs and how the manufacturers are making these things, it seems to me they could have taken this metal and just gone back another 3 inches, and then able to put in some threaded inserts. So that on the bottom, as I said on the closer look, we could actually have some threaded inserts in here to help facilitate mounting this, hard mounting this to something, because this is just a little bit too flexible to me anyway, if you get aggressive with the wheel a little bit, and it tends to rock back and forth. But yeah, and it's kind of funny that you see they've got actually 2 inserts right here and here, that don't have any screws in them, or any threaded inserts in them rather. They're just closed up. So it seems that maybe somewhere in the design process that was an idea, but they decided not to go with it for probably cost reasons. That's usually the way things happen. Right. On the back of the motor, we have the circuit board that's running it and it's giving power, and you can see it's got these huge resistors on here. So those are big wattage resistors, and it's just another, again, it's circuit board there. We've got lots of ferrite cores everywhere for noise reduction, which is a nice thing to see, actually. I like seeing that stuff. And here, as we're coming around the bottom here, there's the coiled, see that? There's the coiled wire that's attached to the steering wheel. So when I was pulling it out, this coil obviously was stretching back and forth. So that's going over to the steering wheel. Right. Now, right in here, this little white piece here, this is the stop for the turns from the wheel. If we go all the way up, let's see, watch this thing, it'll actually go up. It's following some worm gears that are on the shaft here inside this plastic housing. So when I turn the wheel a certain way, it moves, and it's actually going to act as a stop. This wire right here is kind of in the way, but it's going to move that way, and you can see it as it moves, and eventually it's going to go to the top, and there's our stop. All right, so that's the stop mechanism. And if we turn it back to about middle ways, that should be middle on the wheel. And of course, if we kept going, it would just keep going to the back and then stop there for the other rotation stop point. So that's where the stop. It's typically that's a very common way to do it. Logitech doesn't do it. They use a rack and pinion kind of thing, which provides the stops for their wheel. But they've also, because of the way they've designed it, though, it also integrates a dampening effect on the wheel itself, so that it just gives it a different feel. If it wasn't there and they used this kind of a mechanism, it wouldn't feel the same way. It wouldn't have the dampening effect of that rack and pinion, because that pinion on the back of that shaft on a Logitech is driving that rack back and forth. And yeah, it is a stop, but the way they implemented it, they also implemented it to have dampening effect, which works pretty good actually. Right, and of course the brains, we got the usual fare here, the circuit board sitting on top, and a bunch of Molex plugs for their respective electronic connections going everywhere else. Not much to see here. It doesn't really say much on this board as far as the brand of it, or I mean, I'm sure it's a proprietary board. Like most other companies, they'll just make their own boards and have them shipped out to them when they're ready to install them, wherever they install them at. All right, so we're moving around here, and this is where our wires are coming in for our power, and our power is going over to our power supply. So remember, this is an internal power supply where the AC to DC conversion happens right here. I can see some numbers in here, but I don't know. It's probably just a model number. It's not going to tell me what kind of watts it's putting out or how many volts it's putting out. So I don't know what that is. I could probably take it out and test it, but we really don't need to know that. It can't be but so much to have to turn a little motor that size. Right. Anything else we want to see here? Really, I think that's it. Yeah, like I said, it looks like a well-built wheel. You can see on the front here all of the red bits. See those screws with the red on them? That's let them know that you've been inside the wheel mucking about, and if any of that paint is chipped, then it voids the warranty. Right. So, yeah, not much else to see here. It is what it is. It's an entry-level wheel, but it has a pretty good build quality to it for what it is, I think. Now that I actually have it open and I'm seeing how everything's put together here, I think it's a pretty good wheel as far as that goes. I don't know how durable these are. I've heard, obviously, on the internet of guys that have had these things for very short periods of time and they break, and other guys have had them for forever and they never break. So it's just one of those things. But it seems to me in here that all of this stuff, of course, if you needed to take the wheel off, we would. But most of this stuff here is repairable and without too much trouble. If you got a little bit of electronics knowledge, and of course there's always somebody on the internet ready to help. But yeah, overall, I kind of like the layout of this wheel. It's functional. It doesn't really scream anywhere that it has a quality control problem as far as just looking at the way it's set up. They do have a lot of hot glue all over the place on this thing. Got over here, got some over here, just about everywhere. Down here on these wires, hot glue everywhere. So yeah, that's kind of a cheapy thing, but yeah, it is what it is. Like I say, $200 for the wheel and the pedals, then yeah, I think this is not too bad actually. Not too bad. I can't really dog it because it's put together pretty well. So what we'll do next is go ahead and get to the pedals. We'll pull the cover off the pedals, and of course that's just going to be a couple of pedal levers or arms with some potentiometers attached to them, so not a whole lot to see there, but yeah, might as well take them apart if we can, right? So we'll get to the look inside pedal segment next. Right, so now it's time to take apart the pedals, and there's a lot of screws on these pedals. We're gonna have to take these pedal faces off, and there's 2 screws there, and we'll do that first, and then we got a lot of them on the bottom here to take off before we can get to what's inside. So let's go ahead and get started. All right, so the pedal faces have these long machine thread, if you will, flathead screws. And they are different lengths because of the stagger on this pedal itself, the pedal face. So you got to make sure you get the right lengths back in it. And these pedal faces, or pads, what do you want to call them, are the same, exactly, on the back, and the same thing. And they got these injection molded, like we saw before, pedals that have these inserts in them. So those are machine thread inserts. Right, so that's all we got to take off here. Now, if you'll notice, they've got these fake screws over here on this pet. They've actually molded in an injection molding process these fake hex head screws, little pan head jobs. So yeah, but you don't have to take those off. They'll just, you'll just end up stripping it all up because it's plastic. Anyway, we have to go on the back. And there's a lot of screws in here. There's one down here where the cable management piece is. And then we got 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 screws to take off to get the bottom off of this. So, well, let's get to it. All right, as you probably saw, this thing kind of popped open once I got that last screw out over there, and that's because of the spring tension that the pedals have on them. And when we put this back on, if you ever take this off, you're going to have to get this to where you push the bottom plate forward like this to be able to get this lip back in the inside lip there. There's another lip over there. But yeah, you don't have to worry about that until you're putting it back together. So let's go see what we have here. As our pedals fell forward. And again, another, just the usual fare here with the injection molded plastics. It's got an F548 designation on it there for some reason. And some other certifications for the hardness, I imagine. And maybe even the date stamps. But yeah, not a whole lot to see there. And here's our pedals. As we might have imagined, they're just some potentiometers in here. Get everything out of the way. So yep, we got one here, and the potentiometers actually are Fanroy K1000Ns. I don't know how well you'll be able to read that, but there you go. Let me get it situated a little better. Right, so we've got two. Obviously, they're going to be the same. There's not even a board up here to grab these, so it's not really grab those, but there's really not a breakout board anywhere in here. The actual, all the electrical connections are actually going to one cable. They've got a cable with enough leads to do that. And it looks like we got 1, 2, 3, 4. Got 5 leads over here and 5 over here. So that's 10 wires in this cable. And you can see there's plenty of hot glue. Oops. There's plenty. Let's do it this way so they won't fall over. Plenty of hot glue around here. They love hot glue over at Thrustmaster apparently, because it's, we got it sitting over here on the potentiometer connections, the blades over here, we've got it all here. And I imagine there's some tape in here too, some cellophane tape. I don't know what's up with that. Maybe they use the tape before they use the hot glue, something like that in the assembly process. And we can see we've got the springs in there and the green goo grease that I see a lot of that green grease on a lot of assembly. Logitech has it too, so it's like it's maybe where they assemble these in Asia, you know, they like to use the green grease. But yeah, pretty much it. Not a whole lot to see here, and I didn't think it would be. But also, what I do like what I see here as somebody who may be repairing it someday is it looks pretty easy to repair. And yeah, and that's the big point, you know, being able to come in here and replace one of these potentiometers looks to be a rather simple affair. Of course, it always looks simple before you do it, doesn't it? Of course, it looks like these plastic pieces here may be pressed onto the actual potentiometer shaft that comes out of it. So I don't know how easy that would be to replace. I don't see any set screws in it or anything like that. So yeah, who knows? If this goes bad, we might have to just order another set. Or maybe the potentiometer itself will come with it on there, and this hole's big enough for it to pass through. I don't know. Yeah, so yeah, not a whole lot to see. That was a lot of work just to get to see that, huh? It's just not much going on here at all. But then again, we have to keep everything in perspective because of the price point that these things are coming at. And I was expecting, actually, just as on a side note here while we're looking at it, to see some metal in here instead of just a plastic housing, injection molded plastic with this. Looks like they just took these metal threads and hot glued them in maybe, or just pressed them in. I'm not sure how that's working. I can't really see. But anyway, they did hold well when I was driving. I never had a problem with it coming loose or anything. So, and I don't see any cracking or anything. And I pushed on them pretty good as far as being able to drive in your socks. How hard can you push on a pedal? But yeah, there we have it. Nothing else to see here. So what we'll do is go ahead and, as usual, put all this stuff back together. Make sure it still works. And then we'll go and get to the driving segments. Now for a quick look at the wheel mounted to the P1 rig. We're using the P1's optional flat plate mount that has a bunch of holes in it for screws, but unfortunately we're just using the desk clamp because there are no screws. As you saw in the closer look, there are no screws to use. It's only the desk clamp, which does an okay job for what it is. So anyway, we also got the pedals mounted down here on the P1's pedal tray. And yeah, I had put some 90-degree brackets there in the front of this 80/20 profile, and there's a quick picture of that. And yeah, everything's nice and tight there. It's actually tighter there than it is on the wheel. So we'll get to the driving next. So here we are in iRacing in the Lotus 79 at Sebring, and you can see right away that I'm able to catch slides in this car. I really didn't have any trouble feeling when the front end was breaking loose or the rear end was coming around on me. And that's really what a force feedback wheel is supposed to do, and it does that. So I really can't dog this wheel for not giving the force feedback effects you need to control the car. And you'll see during this segment that I'm catching a few slides and feeling exactly what the car is doing. And not a lot of power or torque, as you might imagine, but enough, again, to give you the cues you need to control the car or maintain control of the car. Now, the wheel's okay. I don't have any beef with the wheel, but the pedal, the brake pedal rather, not the throttle, because the throttle's just a throttle. But this brake pedal is a big disappointment to me. It took me quite a long time to get the muscle memory I needed to realize where I was at the braking point, because the spring is just way too weak, in my opinion, for this brake pedal. It's just not good at all. And the bumper is flat. There's no progressive feel to the bumper when you're hitting the stop. It's just you hit the stop. So you're in the air with your foot, and you gotta, again, it's all about muscle memory, trying to figure out where your foot is when you're actually applying the brake to how much brake you're applying to the car. So yeah, I was not happy with this brake pedal at all. It's just, and I don't understand it. It's just, they could do better, I think. And we also went over to Assetto Corsa, and we were in the Corvette over there, and I have to say this wheel actually gave me the usual feel I get from Assetto Corsa. I just have trouble getting this thing to feel like the force feedback in iRacing, or maybe I just prefer it. I don't know. It just always feels a little bit on the vague side for me. But I was able to go in and dial the feedback in a little bit to where I could actually feel a little more detail, I think, than I can in my Bodner wheel when I'm dialing that in, and still getting a good experience, obviously. But overall, in Assetto Corsa, it did a good job too, and not the great job. Again, it's a $200 wheel. We have to keep it in perspective. And the brake pedal obviously did not perform any better in Assetto Corsa than it did in iRacing. But yeah, over here in Assetto Corsa, it just did its job. Now we'll go over to Project Cars and racing some IA guys here. Or AI guys, not IA guys. And yeah, here actually I was pleasantly surprised. I tried different modes of the force feedback that you can do in Project Cars, the raw and so forth, and I ended up with informative being the best one. And it really, with the combination of the power that I had dialed in, which is 100%, it actually didn't feel bad. It felt pretty good. I was able to control the car and pretty much do what I want to with it, which is not usually the case in Project Cars to me, especially if I'm running a direct drive wheel. It just seems like Project Cars is not optimized for those wheels, because it's really, I just can't really get a great feel in Project Cars with my direct drive wheel. Maybe they can improve on that in the future sometime. But again, in the brake pedals, obviously, is doing the same thing in this game too. It's just way too weak, and yeah, to be honest, I would rather have the Thrustmaster T3PA pedals because they're much better. The brake pedal on that is much better than this one here, and I don't know if they did that on purpose, but yeah, the brake pedal here, again, is really the only downfall of this kit that I can see that really rubs me the wrong way. Other than that, yeah, you know, for entry level $200 wheel, I think it does the job that it needs to do. It's, again, at the price point, and being an entry level wheel, if you're coming from using your gamepad and you want to see if you want to use a wheel or not, then this is a good way to go. You don't lose a lot of money. You can actually resell it and get at least 50% of your money back, and then go back to your gamepad if you decide a steering wheel is not for you. All right, so enough of the driving, and what we'll do next is go ahead and get to the final thoughts on the Thrustmaster T150 wheel. Final thoughts on the Thrustmaster T150 wheel kit. Now, this wheel is targeted at the entry-level driving game enthusiast. It's one of the cheapest force feedback wheels available, so we have to manage our expectation levels accordingly. The build quality is decent, but the compromise in materials used is evident here. The wheel mount does fix the base with enough firmness to satisfy most, I think, but I would like to see Thrustmaster add a few inches in length to the internal supporting metal plate. This would allow the installation of a couple of threaded inserts, and this would certainly improve the mounting strength and also the tactile feedback delivered by the wheel. Now, speaking of the feedback, I have to admit I was pleasantly surprised by the quality of the force feedback this system is delivering. I expected to experience not much more than weak vibrations and torque levels just high enough to feel like you're getting some resistance. But I did feel some good detail in the force feedback cues, and overall strength of the feedback was, I think, adequate for a wheel that's coming in at this price point. This due to the combination of a belt drive and a gear drive solution used inside the wheelbase. It actually reminded me of a feel from the Logitech gear-driven wheels, but with a bit less detail than the Logitech wheels actually provide. I believe the way Thrustmaster is using the belt-driven section before using the gear drive component is the cause for this feeling. Now, this is where I think the kit falls short. It's in the pedal set. Not so much the throttle, you know, it does well enough, but you don't need much from a throttle. But the brake pedal is another story. Really, pretty much of a big disappointment for me. There is literally no tactile feedback on this pedal. The spring is very weak, and it's not easy to tell just how far your foot has traveled in the pedal stroke until you actually hit the bump stop. Of course, a brake pedal that is using a potentiometer will always be an issue of a driver's muscle memory being the deciding factor on how well you brake. But with the minimalistic feel delivered by this pedal, it makes for a longer learning curve to develop a feel for how much the brake pedal that you are actually applying when you're pressing it. Now, I think this could be fixed by using a stronger spring and a better feeling or larger bump stop. Really, if you buy this kit, don't think that this brake pedal represents other options out there. It doesn't, including Thrustmaster's own T3PA pedal set, which in my opinion is a much better pedal set than one included with this T150 wheel. Now, overall, I think the T150 pretty much met my expectations, with the exception, of course, of the aforementioned brake pedal. I'm Barry Rowland, and thanks again for watching the Sim Racing Garage channel. And don't forget to hit the subscribe button and help support the SRG by visiting our website at simracinggarage.com.